Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Ruby for All. Julie, what's up?
I'm on call today.
Yeah? How's that going?
Nothing yet. So we'll see. It's going for the week. So on top of that, remember last time we talked about your work doing tech halls?
Yep.
So I went to my manager and asked, hey, my co-host is doing this. And then it was really funny because my manager responded with, we're actually thinking about doing something called Code Chill.
Nice.
And so we were planning on not deploying unless it was a critical deploy next week because our company is also giving us a week off for Christmas to New Year's. So yeah, it'd be really nice. I'm planning on tackling a little bit of tech debt.
Very fun. Very fun. And for the listeners who don't know, they obviously don't know because I only showed you this. But right before we started this podcast, I showed Julie what I have been working on at Podia for Tech the Halls, which for some reason I want to call it Techcember, and I don't know why. I showed Julie what I've been working on, and it's just about done, and I think it's pretty cool. So yeah, having a blast.
Oh, and for the listeners who didn't listen to that episode, we'll put it in the show notes because this will make sense if you listen to it first.
Yep, definitely listen to that one first and then come back or just keep going. Because today we want to talk about kind of work processes and how we work, how our teams function. And I've been on a few different teams, so I'm going to talk about a few different ways and compare, contrast the way different teams work. Maybe you'll find something that you like from the way I've worked in the past. Maybe I'll find something the way you work, and then maybe we can implement that change. Who knows? And to the listeners, maybe you can as well. So Julie, how do you work?
I've been on 2 different teams since working at Codecademy. And in the first team, I want to say we didn't actually have a clearly defined process, or maybe I was just really new and didn't know exactly what the process was because we didn't have sprints, at least when I started. And it was kind of just like backlog and pick up tickets. And at some point, I was assigned tickets from our PM. In the current team that I'm on, we do sprints, 2-week sprints. And I'll have you explain what a sprint is.
So a sprint is a Agile term. And I guess maybe I should define Agile. But first, there's so many ways to define Agile. But a sprint is a set period of time during which specific work has to be completed and made ready for review. So basically, a sprint is like, okay, in this time box, and that's a key point to a sprint is this time boxed. We are going to complete all of these tasks in this one sprint. And then in the next sprint, we'll complete these tasks. And the idea is to not let tasks bleed over. It's like you only assign what you know you can complete in that sprint. And that comes with a lot of practice and time, but you get better. And it also forces you to break down tasks a lot more. Instead of a big task, you have a lot of smaller tasks. So Agile software development, actually, have you ever heard of waterfall development?
I have heard of it, but I don't remember what it is.
So a lot of people also liken it to baking cake. It's basically this idea of like, okay, we need to build some software. You're my product manager and you're like, okay, I need you to go build all the software and I'm going to describe it to you and just go build it. And I'm going to be like, okay. And then a few months later, I'm going to come back with the completed project and I'm like, here it is. All you wanted. It's all done. And then you're going to obviously look at it and be like, oh, well, I want all these things changed. And so the waterfall starts back over. You give me all these requirements. I go off for a while. I come back. I can give you the completed project. And then it's not iterative, really. It's like one flowing process that starts over instead of iterating, because you start over back at the top of like, okay, I now have all these new requirements and that you need to fix. So
it's kind of inefficient.
Very inefficient, which is why Agile is very popular among most software teams, I believe. If they don't call it Agile, they're probably doing something similar, or they've taken ideas from Agile. It's all encompassing right now. It's very popular. But what it is basically is an iterative methodology for building software where your requirements and your solutions evolve through collaboration through those different teams. So I guess I left out a step in that waterfall. Is that you tell a designer what you want them to build, and the designer gives me the design, I build it, and then I give someone to test it and they test it and then it's done. So there's no iteration, there's no communication between teams. It's just like one thing. And then with Agile, it's much more like, okay, the product manager and the designer and the developers are like working as a group, maybe even a small group, and you're closely tackling like these features for this specific thing. And then you deliver it. That's a big part of Agile, is like delivering these small iterative changes. So instead of delivering one big finished project, you deliver a piece of it, and then you do another sprint, deliver a piece, another sprint piece. And that way, if something messes up or if you need to go back to the drawing board, it's not as costly. And you can deliver features instead of products, basically.
Tying back to the baking a cake thing, is this like you have a finished cake and then you bring it back and then that's when they say, oh, well, I want different colored frosting?
Yes. To build a cake, I go out, get all the ingredients, make the cake, and then deliver it. And then you're like, oh, well, I want these changes. But now those changes aren't really possible now, because either I'm done and now you need to find another developer team. Like if you're working with like contractors or something, that's a lot of times where you'll see this is like, you'll be like, hey, contractors, go build this thing. And they come back and it's like, that's not what I wanted at all. And too late. Now you have to hire them for a new cycle, or you need to find more. It's headache inducing. And so if we want to deliver as much value to our customers as quickly as possible, then Agile is the way to go. I don't want to get into scrums and swim lanes and points and all that. I mean, we might touch on points organically, but other than that, so yeah, that's what Agile
like
is.
Some homework to look up.
Well, Scrum is just basically a meeting that you have like every day or something, or every week or whatever. So, but there's more to it, but that's basically part of it. Anyway, do you guys point your stories? So like if I give you a story, do you point and be like, oh, this is 2 points. I expect this to take you the amount of time we suspect 2 points to take, which may be a day or 2 days. Do y'all do that?
First of all, what's a story?
So the sprint is made up of stories. So tasks, basically.
Oh, or tickets.
Yeah, tickets. They're called, in Agile, they're called stories specifically. But yes, okay. Tickets. So your sprint is made up of tickets for you. And do y'all assign like a point value to those at all?
Yes. So we have a meeting every week called backlog grooming, where any tickets that have not been pointed, we will take a vote. And we use the Fibonacci scale. So a 1 point ticket might be a 1 line change or something very simple.
Like a half day thing.
Copy change. Yeah, a half day, I guess. And a 2 point ticket may be more involved. Maybe it takes more time to do, but it's still relatively not complex. And then 3 is more complex. And then 5, we don't want to go any more than 5. I think at that point, it's better to break the ticket up into smaller pieces. But a 5 would be something like a bug that you really have no idea where to start, or a spike, like need a research on something before you implement something. How about you?
Gotcha. So I'll talk about the way we work at Podia later because it's very different, but I have worked in Agile workshops before. And so we did 1 point, 2 points, 4 points, 8 points instead of what you said, 1, 2, 3, 5, 7?
1, 2, 3, 5, 8.
Yeah. So we did 1, 2, 4, 8. And so the way we kind of thought about them, and there's a lot more nuance to this, but if I give you a 1 point story, I expect it to be done in half a day or less, so that I expect you to be able to do that in 1 day, basically. 2 points is more of like a day or 2. 4 points is closer to like 4 days, a week maybe. And then 8 points, we tried to not do any 8 point stories, but they were basically like 2 week stories, maybe more.
Okay. So your points are actually by time. Our points are more by how complex we think it is.
Complexity relates to time, though, to some people. We're getting into like, how do you point things, which is a very hard topic.
That's fair, because at the same time, you also have juniors and seniors and a mix of people that know the code base well, and maybe they're seniors, but they don't know the code base as well. And
I think our goal was that it wouldn't matter what level you were. It was not encouraged. I had one coworker who really was like, you are not allowed to change the story points. What you'll often find, though, is that like you're working on a 1 and then it just balloons and suddenly like there's things and you didn't think about and issues that people didn't plan for. And now it's a 4, right? And you're working on it for like a week or something. One of my coworkers was like, you cannot change the story. But if you're getting evaluated based on those story points, like if you have a certain quota of story points you have to hit in a quarter, in the year, or whatever, you kind of have to almost. Yeah. Pointing things in general and like deciding like how long will something take and like how do you decide, is this a 1 for me and a 2 for someone else? Or how do we make that distinction? I think a lot of it kind of went to like, we try to give the seniors the more bigger, complex stories, let the juniors and the mid devs pick up the stuff down the chain a little bit. Obviously not exclusively, because you don't want your senior only working on the hard stuff. If he goes somewhere, then, or they go somewhere, then it's gone. So it's hard to balance it out, but pairing is a big part of Agile, and, or at least I think it is. And so that's where you can get a lot of benefit of like, okay, this is a 2. And for this junior, specifically based on their knowledge set, maybe it's actually kind of a 4. But if we pair them up with a senior, then it goes back to a 2. And when you think about the complexity of the task, right? Because that's why time and complexity are very much related here. The complexity relates to the time often, I think, at least in my mind. So I don't know. It's hard, very hard.
To the point that you were saying to not change story points, I tend not to change mine, even if it blew up or if a 3-point ticket ended up being really easy. I won't change the story point, which actually works in my favor, but we don't actually get evaluated on our performance in that way. If something was a 2 and it was meant to be a 3, I don't often change that, but sometimes I will. I think it's more likely that we will change to a higher point than to reduce our point.
Well, a lot of the thinking behind not changing it is the idea with Agile is that you meet at the end of like the cycle and you go and have like a post sprint breakdown of like, okay, what worked, what didn't work, this and that. And that's where you would be like, okay, we pointed these stories incorrectly. This was really a 4. What it's meant to do is to like enhance the overall team. And so in the future, you can point it more appropriately. But if you're getting evaluated on it, like I was for a certain period of time evaluated on how many points I was doing. And if you're in that situation, then I mean, 100% incentivized to like update those points, because you're like, okay, I spent a week on this. It's only pointed a 1 and I need a certain amount of points at the end of the year. So I'm obviously going to change this because I want them to know I was doing stuff. So, but that's the idea of not changing them, so that everyone gets better and everyone improves, and like the overall ability to like calculate the points improves.
That makes a lot of sense. So if you were on a 2-week sprint, then you might have, it sounds like you're describing what we call at my work a sprint retro, where we have a team meeting and they can name these different things, but basically the positives, the not so positive, the learnings and action items that come out.
Is everyone encouraged to speak, or is there kind of like one project leader of the developers talking?
We have kind of a sprint leader for each sprint. So I once led the sprint where I would lead these meetings, and I want to say I led 1 retro. I led 2 retros so far. We also switched the way that we do retros. We used FigJam once, and FigJam is nice because it's very visual. So you can use sticky notes and put what you want to put, and everyone can see what everyone's putting. So if you forget something, you might get reminded by what someone else is putting, and it's not anonymized. And then we just recently switched over to Parabol to test it out. And Parabol, you can anonymize it or not, but you can't see what the other person is typing until all the cards are revealed. So it's nice because you don't have to think about, oh, maybe I don't want to say this because I don't want people to think it's coming from me. And so I think being anonymous allows you to maybe be more truthful. I don't know which method our team likes better. We're still kind of evaluating.
I will say FigJam, it's a collaborative whiteboard kind of thing built into Figma. Everyone can like add stuff, and it's meant to be like a collaborative tool.
Hi there, Julie here. I would like to take a moment to thank GoRails for sponsoring this episode. When I was first starting out, I struggled with finding up-to-date content to help me level up. Then I learned about GoRails. Not only does GoRails provide new screencasts weekly, they also have 2 fantastic instructors that break down complex topics into digestible chunks. On top of that, I really appreciate when they explain the whys behind the subject. One of my favorite walkthroughs is creating your first Ruby gem from scratch. What a great way to learn by stripping down to just the basics. If you care about leveling up as a Ruby engineer, you can't go wrong with GoRails. Check it out at gorails.com.
We kind of did something similar, except it was not with any sort of tool. It was just a meeting. And usually there was a developer that was like kind of leading the developers, and there was a product manager and the designer, and all the developers would come, but the lead developer would usually speak for everyone. And now when I went to a different team, it was much more intentional of like going through each developer and be like, what worked, what didn't work? What are your thoughts? And like actually making sure those thoughts were heard. Because what I found ended up happening a lot is like just what you were saying. There's maybe feedback that I want to say, but like maybe I forgot to tell my lead developer, or maybe they forget, or maybe I don't want to tell them for whatever reason. You know, if someone's speaking for the whole team, a lot of those like smaller pieces can get left out. So I really like what y'all are doing. That's really cool. Using like some sort of software like that is really smart. I like that.
It's also really structured. So when I was leading the Fig Jam meeting, there was no structure. So I often forgot, okay, what do I do next? How many minutes is each thing? But with Parable, it's like you just click continue and it tells you what you need to do next. So it was nice for juniors to get into the habit of doing these things and not really knowing what the process is.
I like that a lot. Now, I don't work like that at Podia, but I've worked like that for the majority of my career, except when I worked at CodeFund. And CodeFund, though, was a lot more collaborative because I became like the lead developer. So I was the one picking out tasks a lot of the time. And we had a small team, so we didn't really need a whole project management suite. But Podia works a lot similar to the way I think a lot of us know Basecamp works, in that it's a lot more long form content, a lot less emphasis on no sprints. It's very project focused. So instead of like, hey, we're going to do a sprint and we're going to do this and this, we make projects and we work towards those projects, and there aren't really cycles inside of them. But if the projects are too big, they'll be split out or split between teams. The project I was just doing got split between a front end and a back end team. And it's a lot more, like I said, written content based. We use Basecamp, and someone is going in there and writing tasks. There's no points. There's just the task description, and like any collaboration that needs to go on about that task will happen in that Basecamp description. And in Basecamp, you can have projects and separate them and create hill charts and all this stuff. So we do all of that. And at the end of the week, the champion is what we call them. The champion of the project will write up a description of everything everyone worked on, what was accomplished. And that keeps our CEO, our CTO, our designer in the loop. And yeah, so it's very project based. Instead of being like 2 weeks, we do this work. Next 2 weeks, we do this work. And so you're like basically grouped up with someone else or maybe multiple other developers on the project, and you work till it's done. And so I've worked on 3 projects. It's really 2, but I'm going to call it 3. The first project I did was rewriting our checkout at Podia, which I did probably up until the summer. And then I rewrote one of our tables with Turbo instead of Seamless Reflex, and did a bunch of other things, added infinite pagination and just kind of some like changes to the way our tables work. And this last project was filtering and segments and all this stuff for our audience table. And so those are the 3 projects I've worked on at Podia for the most part.
Nice. So how do you determine how long a project might take? Or is there no estimation?
This was a question I forgot to ask you. Who assigns points to stories for y'all? Is it the developers or is it project management?
We take a vote. So
okay,
we just point with our fingers, and oftentimes as the junior who is on a very front end focused team, don't know how complex something might be. I look to see how other people are pointing, but keeping a number in my mind and then kind of gauging from then.
Gotcha.
I wanted to ask you, so when your project manager points things, do they have to be technical in order to know how long something might take?
It depends on the shop. And from my perspective, if you have a project management team that knows the product intimately, then it is possible for them to be able to point them by themselves. But then I find the most helpful thing after that is then having the lead developer come back and check and like verify. If they know the product very well and you have a good team, then 100% they could do it. They don't have to be technical.
Cool.
You asked me a question, and that was who picks the projects and who assigns the time and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So our CEO, Spencer, is very involved in that. I think he works with our lead designer and Jamie, our CTO, and maybe even Jason, who's like basically the lead developer, to kind of figure out some of that. But Spencer does all that, and I'm happy for that. He's like, here's what we're going to work on. But the best part about it is that by the time the project gets to the developers, it's already gone through the product iteration. Like Spencer's already thought about what this feature is, what he wants it to do, what he wants it to look like. Our designer has already made a mock-up of all the screens, of all the components. And then by the time it gets to the developers, it's like, okay, here's the mock-ups. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. And now y'all make tasks and build out this project. So the champion of the project is in charge of picking the tasks, but our CEO is in charge of picking the projects.
So a champion is kind of like a tech leading a project.
Yep. And I think you said that you led a project. You would be the champion in our system for that.
Got it.
It's basically like the point person. If our designer needs something, or, we want to talk about features or something's not working with it, and we're testing it or something, like that's the person you go to discuss. I mean, it could be all together, right? It might be in a group Slack message and we're discussing it, or it might be one-on-one with that developer, and then they're going into Basecamp and updating tasks accordingly and communicating with the other developers on that team.
So since you don't have sprints, what are your meetings like? Team meetings?
I love this about Podia because we really don't do team meetings much. Every Monday morning, we have like maybe 5 to 15 minute meeting with the whole company. And each department goes through kind of what they are working on and what happened last week. And then each of the developer teams, so each team that's working on a specific project, will go through what they did last week and what they're doing this week. And it's very quick. And what it is Spencer takes all of the Basecamp data basically, and I'm assuming from other departments, it might be a little different. From the developers, he reads through our Basecamp updates that the project leader posts on every Friday. And then he writes an email on like Saturday or Sunday that goes out to everyone. That is basically the agenda of the meeting. And so we show up on Monday, we've already got the agenda. We roll through it quickly. It's really fast. Then in your project, you'll have like maybe a weekly project check-in with Spencer and the designer and Jamie, our CTO, and whoever else, and everyone working on that project will get together maybe once a week, maybe more, depends on the developers and the project. But for the developer meetings, we meet every other Friday to like talk about a specific topic. It might be, I don't know, error monitoring, or someone will pick a topic and present on it. It's more fun and educational than it is like a meeting. And it's kind of like a time to get all the developers together to think about something. So we don't really have many meetings, which I love because I'm used to having lots of meetings, and I love waking up and like, oh, there's nothing on my calendar today or tomorrow or the next day.
How many people usually work on a project at a time?
Usually 2 developers, maybe 1, maybe 3.
So pretty small. Our meetings, because we do sprints, we do have a little bit more meetings than what you have. Basically, I meet with my team about once a day, and we do asynchronous stand-ups. So some teams might have daily stand-ups where you discuss what you worked on the previous day. We do that asynchronously. And so our meetings are actually like, we do a sprint kickoff where we start the sprint. And then on Thursdays, we do a show and tell, which is kind of fun because it could be sharing anything that you want to talk about. It could be something you learned, or it could be a complicated PR that you're working on and you want to share that with the team. And then we have a PR review meeting on Friday, which is also fun. Like if you want to share, again, a complicated PR or just review PRs as a group. And on Tuesdays are our backlog grooming that I mentioned before. And then we end with a retro every sprint.
Nice. You reminded me, bringing up topic of stand-ups. At Code Fund, we had virtual stand-ups too. So a bot would message us every day and be like, what'd you do yesterday? What are you doing today? Blah, blah, blah. And I like that. And I tried to push for that at a different company because I was just sick of meetings. I had so many meetings at that company. The tech lead was basically like, I like to see everybody's face every morning. So no, we're going to do it on cam. And I understand that. That's fine. But at the same time, I would rather have done it virtually and then maybe done it once a week. But that's something that people may forget that when you're like, oh, why can't we just do this virtually? There are people out there who are like, hey, a lot of us are working remotely. I'm kind of lonely and I really want to see everyone's face every day. And if they have the power to do that, then so be it. But please, less meetings, people, please.
I'm on board with less meetings as well. I think the amount of meetings that my team has is not that much. So compared to like having sprints, and I like that a lot.
I like it too, because I'm one of those people, and maybe you identify with this, where if I have a meeting at 10 o'clock, I might not do anything until 10. Because I'm like, well, I have this meeting coming up, so I can't really get into like any deep work, this or that. And by the time I'm like, well, now I might as well just like chill until the meeting. So
for me, it was challenging knowing what times our meeting was, if each day it was a different time. So I asked our team if we could have it at the same time every day. That way I knew like at this time every day. And as long as it's not early, because a lot of my team is on the East Coast. So as long as it wasn't too early and it was at the same time every day, then I could always remember to be there. And it just so happens that it's at a time right after I drop off the kids from school. So it works out perfectly for me.
Stand up is exactly why I wake up at the time I wake up now, because when I first moved out here, my stand-ups were at like 6 or 7 my time, whereas before they were like 10 Eastern. So like, it was like, okay, well, I have to wake up. So I have to like shower and eat before I do these meetings. And then it's like, well, you know, I need to prepare for these meetings. And now suddenly I'm waking up at 4:30.
I woke up at 4 this morning.
I saw you tweeted something really early when I like rolled out of bed this morning.
I don't remember what I tweeted, but I was up early. I went to bed at like 8 o'clock last night.
I get in bed usually around 9, but
wow.
I think we're about out of time. Do you have anything else you want to say on this topic?
I do not.
I gave a very glossy, not deep definition of Agile. And I know there are people out there who believe in Agile very passionately, some of them way too passionately. But if you are one of those people that's like, if you're a Scrum Master, which I'm not going to define, but, or you're huge into Agile and you're huge into like these methodologies, let us know. And maybe we can have you on the show to kind of talk about that. If that's something anyone wants to hear, let us know. And if you're that person, let us know. Cool. Well, I think this will be coming out over the holiday break. So to everyone out there, I hope everyone is safe and enjoying their holidays and not going mentally insane from having to deal with family. And Julie, I will see you next week.
All right. See you next week. Bye. Everyone.